All right, please take your Bibles and take them over to Ecclesiastes. We're going to continue our series and keep rolling in it. I'm well aware of our busy schedule for tonight, so I'm going to do my utmost to move through this as efficiently as possible, and so we can move on to our fellowship time later on this evening. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 is where we're headed. For sake of time, I'm not going to read all of the verses. We're going to be looking at verses 1 through 10. I'm going to read, though, the first verse. Still hear some pages turning, let you get there. Ecclesiastes 9. Solomon has finished with what we studied last time, talking specifically about how we handle authority and government type leadership in the world. And then he's going to fall back into some familiar topics that we've studied before, namely some of the vanities that we experience in life. And in verse 1, he says this, "For all this I considered in my heart, even to declare all this, that the righteous and the wise in their works are in the hand of God. No man knoweth either love or hatred by all that is set before them." If you're like me, and I think you probably are, at least in this area, you like control, right? Especially men understand this. We like to be in control of things. I feel safe, I feel secure, I feel happy when I feel like most of my life I'm in control of. So my finances, my schedule for the day, my whatever that might be, you can fill in the blank. As long as I feel like I'm in control of that specific thing, in life in general, I feel pretty happy, I feel pretty secure. And that is kind of significant with most anybody in life, okay? So no matter who you are, no matter if you're saved, you're unsaved, we value being in control. In fact, that is very encouraged. And so throughout life, you're going to hear that it's important to take control of your life and be in control in every area that you can possibly be in, because in that you will find the most happiness, you will find the most success. And as I got thinking through that in my own mind, and I'm reading through this passage here in Ecclesiastes, as we saw in verse 1, Solomon says that the righteous, the wise, their works, they are in the hands of who? They're in the hands of God, exactly. Not in the hands of you and me, not in the hands of man. And I realized as you think about trials that you've experienced personally maybe, hardships that you have experienced, you realize that at any point when that happens, what's going on is you have lost control of something, of that specific area. So if you're going through a financial crisis, a trial financially, ultimately, really, you've lost control of your finances in some way, at least the kind of control that you want. You have perhaps a child that has gone wayward and you feel like you've lost control of your family. And the list goes on of whenever a trial happens, every time it's representative of you losing control of something. And so then it comes down to, well, how much do you value control? How much should you and I value control in this life? We're going to study that as we go through the first 10 verses here in Ecclesiastes chapter 9. And the first thing we see here, and the title of my message, by the way, is Learn to Live by Letting Go. Learn to live by letting go. The first thing we see here, verses 1 through 6, is the certainty of fatality. The certainty of fatality. So Solomon makes this observation that everything is in the hands of God, not us. And then he goes on to talk about this common thread that every human being in this world, regardless of who you are, shares. So verses 1 through 6 says this. Follow along with me. It says, "For all this I considered in my heart, even to declare all this, that the righteous and the wise in their works are in the hands of God. No man knoweth either love or hatred by all that is before them." Verse 2, "All things have come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good and to the clean and to the unclean, and to him that sacrifices and to him and sacrificeth, and to him that sacrificeth not. As is the good, so is the sinner, and he that sweareth as he that feareth an oath." I'm going to stop there. So verses 1 through 2 here, he notices this commonality that happens, that regardless of who you are and your background, regardless of whether you do right, whether you do wrong, and he goes through this huge list of, the good and the bad and examples of it. It doesn't matter what you do, who you are, the same thing happens to everybody, it seems like. You experience trials, you experience blessing. There doesn't seem to be any consistency in the two. And then he goes on to talk about ultimately the truth that every person, no matter who you are, will experience one thing. And he's talking about death. It's an encouraging thought, right? Then to add insult to injury here, in a sense, in verse 3, he says, this is an evil among all things that are done under the sun, that there is one event unto all, yea, also the heart of the sons of men is full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. So it's like even while they're living, dead is bad, but even while men are living, they choose to do what? They choose to follow after evil and madness in life, and then what happens in the end? Well, they die. So this is something, again, that Solomon, as he's observing the world around him, as he's experienced life thus far in his life, he's thinking, this doesn't make sense again. He's recognizing the vanity of death, he's recognizing the vanity of trials, and he's also recognizing the emptiness of people. And even in the time that they are still alive, they are pursuing what? They're pursuing wickedness, not making proper use of the time they have on this earth. Moving on from there, in verses 4 through 6, though, we see a hope of life. A hope of life that Solomon talks about. He'll look down with me, verses 4 through 6. He says, for to him that is joined to all the living, there is what? Hope. All right, so there's a hope here. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. That's interesting. For the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything. Neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. All their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished. Neither have they any more a portion forever in anything that is done under the sun. Now we have to understand a little bit of the context here, because if you're like me, you read that and you think, wait a minute. I thought the proper biblical view was not to fear death. In fact, we in some ways can celebrate our death because what? Because if we're believers, we experience what? Promotion to heaven, right? And so upon death, we stand before Christ. And so we think, Solomon, what are you talking about here? You don't have the whole picture. If you have a proper biblical view, then you would know that death is a good thing for us as believers. We'll be before God. Well, if we understand the context of what he's talking specifically here about life on earth, okay? He's not denying an afterlife here. He's talking specifically about our value of time on this earth, okay? So you have to view what he talks about from this point on within that context. He's strictly talking about the experience of life on earth, okay? He then gives us an interesting proverb to illustrate his point, all right? So he talks about in verse 4 what? A living dog is better than a dead lion, okay? And I look at that and I think absolutely. In fact, I'd say a dead dog is still more valuable than a live kitten, or a live cat. That's my opinion. If you're a cat person, I'm sorry, I just lost you right there, didn't I? I'm allergic. I have a good excuse to not like cats. But the illustration here is a living dog is better than a dead lion. And again, it's important to get the historical context to understand what he's talking about here. Because when we think of a dog, what do we think of in our modern day context? Man's best friend, right? I mean, how many of you have a dog in here? And how many of you love your dog? All right, yeah. See, we love dogs. I love dogs. I love my dog. They're basically family to us. Out of any animal in the world, you could probably select the dog as one of the most treasured animals amongst the world today. Okay, we've over the past several 100 years, we've bred them and we've developed them into helpers of men. Okay, back in that time, that was not the view of the dog. Okay. So forget all the breeds. It wasn't that way. There was this simple dog, basically. That was it. And they were known for being filthy scavengers, okay? And so to put it into our context today is probably how we would view a rat, all right? So ancient dog, today's rat, okay? That's the idea that's going on here. So he's saying that it's better to be a living dog, okay, living rat, okay? You're better off being a live rat than a dead lion. And we can kind of understand a lion here, okay? We still appreciate the majesty of the lion, certainly back in that time. And I think there's a parallel here in Proverbs 30. Proverbs 30, where it talks about the respect that is given to the lion, okay? And that was common in that culture. The lion was deemed the king of the animal kingdom, okay? And so we can understand that one. So it's saying here, better to be that dead rat than an alive lion. Okay, if we want to put it in human terms, better to be an alive pauper than a dead king. Okay, if you want to try to make that parallel. That's what he's saying. So he's valuing life here, obviously. For the living, in verse 5, he says this, for the living know that they shall die. But the dead know not anything, obviously. Neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. So what is the hope that we as the living have? What is the advantage that the living have over the dead? It is our ability, our opportunity to recognize and consider the reality of death and then live our lives and evaluate our lives and our decisions in our lives according to our knowledge of our coming death. Okay, that's what he's trying to say here. That there is value in your life, regardless of what you think you have or you don't have in life. To be alive, no matter what you have or don't have, is better than being dead, no matter what you had or didn't have. Okay? Because when you're dead, you're dead. All right? You're not enjoying anything. You're not enjoying the pleasures of life that God has given. You're done. It's over. That phrase in verse 5, but the dead know not anything. And to understand that again in context at the time, it was very, very common in that ancient time. The Babylonian, the Assyrian cultures were pretty dominant. And according to them, there was a sense of the spirit or a ghost, if you will, of a being after they died that was still on earth. In fact, it was common for them for families to bring food and drink to the tombs of their ancestors to help provide for them and feed them and give them drink for their spirit or their ghost living on earth. And so this was pretty revolutionary for Solomon to say this at this time, because that was the common view, was that even when you died, your spirit somehow still existed on this earth. Solomon teaches the opposite here. As far as your earthly life is concerned, upon your death, you're done. Good message for the day after Halloween, right? Unfortunately, that kind of kills a lot of the fun there. There's no spirits and there's no ghosts, all right? According to Solomon here, we're done. When you're dead, you're done. You're gone. Your enjoyment of anything in this life is completely over. And then continuing his point even further in verse 6, he says, also their love and their hatred and their envy is now perished. Neither have they any more a portion forever in anything that is done under the sun. So he continues this thought. When you're dead, what do you not enjoy anymore? Well, you have no longer the ability to enjoy the love, the hatred, and that word envy, that's translated in a few different ways. You could say it as zeal, as jealousy, and there's a general translation that I think helps us here as simply passions or passions of life. Okay, so their ability to enjoy the passions that are common to the living is no more, okay? That word portion talks about the share that they have been given by God in life. And if we were to jump back to chapter 2, this should sound somewhat familiar to us. And again, Solomon does in many ways repeat lessons that he's taught before. But back in chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, we would be reminded that the true pleasures Solomon is referring to here are not the enjoyment of fleshly pleasures. Okay, he's talking about the good pleasures of life that are a result of our understanding that they are what from God? Gifts. So it's a recognition of not what we deserve, but recognizing that whatever we do get from God, because we know we don't deserve anything, are gifts from God. But when you're dead, obviously, you no longer get to enjoy those gifts. Those wonderful gifts of pleasure in this life from God upon death, they are what? They're gone. And at the end there, Solomon very emphatically says they are what? They are no more, okay? Permanently, forever. You got one shot in life, okay? There's no redos. It's a good lesson, one that is I don't think, foreign to us. You get one shot to live the life that you have right now. Solomon's encouragement, live it. Live the life that God has given you, but live within the portion that he has given you. We're going to talk about that more in a second. In verses 7 through 9, look down with me. He says this, go thy way, eat thy bread with joy, and drink thy wine with a merry heart. For God now accepteth thy works. Let thy garments be always white, and let thy head lack no ointment. Live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest all the days of the life of thy vanity, which he hath given thee under the sun, all the days of thy vanity, for that is thy portion in this life, and in thy labor which thou takest under the sun. All right, so he explains a little bit about this. You have one shot at life, okay? Once you're dead, it's over. You don't get a chance to redo. You will no longer enjoy the pleasures that God has given as gifts to you while you were still alive. So take advantage of those things. So what does he say? He says, go. He says, get out of here. Enjoy your life. Go eat. Amen? Go eat. Enjoy the food. Enjoy the drink, okay? Find pleasure in that. And then he says, something kind of interesting. He talks about the importance of, putting on white garments and ointment, lotion. So men, don't forget to enjoy lotion, okay? Again, you read some of this stuff, you're kind of like, lotion? Out of all the things you could pick about enjoying life, you picked lotion. Ladies might appreciate that. Well, what was going on here, if you kind of understand, again, the geographical and the historical context, what's going on. No air conditioning, obviously. They're in the desert. And so white garment, it was meant to be an idea, the mentality of comfortable, okay? So they're comfortable. And then the lotion, think about where you're at. You're in the desert, right? Okay, so you don't have much water. Obviously, the air is very dry. You're under the beating sun all the time, so lotion would have been of value. Ointment, okay, to help heal and to moisturize your skin, okay? So he's talking about living life comfortably, okay? So this was very practical at the time. It might not seem so much now, but it's a practical point in the culture of that time about being comfortable in life. It's okay to be comfortable in life. It's okay to enjoy the niceties of life, is what he's saying. He goes on talking about the importance of enjoying relationships with people, specifically talking about what? The marriage. Husbands, enjoy your wife. Marriage ought to be a help and a blessing from God to bring enjoyment to the frustrations of life. It ought not be the other way around. Your marriage ought not feel like it's deterring you from what you are enjoying or what you could be enjoying in life, guys. If you want more on that, just come back Sunday mornings. Especially next week. I think you're going to get some good advice. Enjoy the wife that God has given you. Enjoy your family. Because marriage is a gift from God, we are certainly assured of its goodness to be enjoyed, are we not? Certainly above all of these things. Solomon here is listing important things. It's certainly above all these things, guys, our greatest gift outside of our salvation is our wives, right? Enjoy your wife. While you are living, while you are able to now enjoy what God has given you, enjoy your what? Enjoy your portion in life. That word in verse 9, portion, is speaking about the pleasure and joys of life that God has chosen to give you specifically. Much of what is difficult in our understanding of enjoying life comes to what we think about this idea of God's portion for us. We have an idea, an expectation of what our portion should be. And oftentimes, what we deem as the appropriate portion for us is not always what God's portion is. And too often, what do? We focus on the portion that we think that we deserve, but we do not yet have, and our pursuit is that part of it. And therein lies the emptiness. This is, again, reiterating things that we have seen before from Solomon, but he is saying, celebrate, rejoice, enjoy whatever portion that you have while you're alive. Whether you are the pauper or the king, enjoy God's portion and celebrate in it, recognizing it's not about what you deserve, it is about the gift that God has given you in that portion. That is a hard point to get to, but when you get to that point, life is so much more enjoyable. Find joy in your portion. That brings us here to the final verse of this section, verse 10. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might. For there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest. So based on the encouragements that we've seen so far, to be content, to find comfort in finding joy and companionship, these things in turn help us to engage the tasks, the labors of life with what? With energy, with confidence. Our view of life and what we receive in life will have an impact on how we carry ourselves and how hard we work at our jobs, how hard we push ourselves to accomplish things in this life. You know, when you're grateful for what you do have, does that affect how you work and how you're motivated to work? It certainly does. I know it does for me. When you accept the portion that you have, and from that point you're thankful for it, and you say, I thank God for what I do have, and I'm going to take what I have now, and with joy and with confidence that is exactly what I need from God, I'm going to work hard and push forward in this life, giving my utmost in everything. That word hand that's used in that verse 10 refers to one's strength, their ability to accomplish something. So the idea here is whatever opportunities present themselves during your life, all right? So whatever you have the opportunity to do while you're alive, based on the joy of the portion God has given you, engage in those opportunities with all the abilities and all the strength that God has chosen to give you. Hold nothing back. Do it with might and do it with energy. Now, some of you who are really paying attention may have noticed I skipped a phrase back in verse 7. I skipped it intentionally because I think it'll help now as we've talked through some of these things to give a foundation and a reason for why we as believers can and should live this life with contentment, comfort, and joy, accepting God's portion for us. If you look at the end of verse 7, you'll see the phrase what? For God now accepteth thy works. Commentator Michael Eaton describes this as the remedy of faith, and he's talking about the remedy to this life. So the remedy to this life being faith. He says that this might be the closest that Solomon ever comes in his book here to referencing the doctrine of justification by faith. The reality that we can find our contentment and joy in life if we but receive them as gifts from God. You know, if we are truly believers, if we are Christians, followers of Christ, we aren't, or we shouldn't be at least, struggling with Christ's acceptance of us, right? Because that's already been done. Christ does accept us. Based on us? No. Based on what? The gospel. Based on Jesus Christ. There's certainly no promise here in Ecclesiastes or anywhere in Scripture of a believer in God experiencing financial prosperity, good health, or superficial happiness. You'll never find that anywhere in Scripture, including here. The way of faith and obedience does, however, lead to the blessing and approval of who is most important, and that is Jesus Christ. Solomon here emphasizes that each of us is destined to experience both good and evil, both love and hate, both misery, both folly. Christians, unsaved alike, will experience life together. There's no doubt about it. And Christianity does not preach, it does not teach that we will be exempt from that in any way. All you have to do is look at the life of Christ. He came down to earth, right? And in his short life, what does it say in Matthew? He didn't have a place to lay his head. He certainly did not come as a king, a seeming king of the world, right? It says he hardly had a place to lay his head, and ultimately what did he do? At the age of 30, he went to the cross, he died for us, and that was it. That was his life here on earth. Look at his disciples and how they lived. Traveling, persecuted, most of them martyred for following Christ. That was their portion in life. That was what they were given, and none of them would trade it for a second. We have to look outside of our own desires, our own self, and recognize that what we have, what we desire in life isn't always what God's portion will be for us, but that is okay. Our responsibility is simply to have faith that Christ has accepted us. We are justified by faith. We are in his eyes as Christ because of Christ. That's who he sees. We celebrate in that and we dedicate our lives for him. His conclusion at the end was not that his faith was weak, right? This is talking about Paul here. As Paul demonstrated this so well. Paul's conclusion was that his faith was not that his faith was weak because he struggled. And how many of you, like me, you do the same thing? When you experience the trials, the portions of life that you don't think you deserve or are too hard for you, you question what? You either question God or you think something's wrong with my faith. My faith is messed up, or my faith is not working right now. Paul took joy in the knowledge that God's power was being made manifest in his what? In his weaknesses, in his hardships. He relished in the glory he knew God would receive through the hard portions that God gave him in his life. That oftentimes is our lot. Our faith is so much more than having control in life or trying to manipulate the benevolence and grace of God. You know what that is? That's idolatry. This is interesting to think about. In the name of faith, I think we so often try to manipulate God into getting what we want. And we use faith as our security that we will be, whatever our desires might be, we will get. It's self-serving, it's idolatry. True faith has been described as the radical abandonment of our whole being, giving grateful trust and love to God, not something that we practice out of self-interest. Again, let me say again, not something that we practice out of self-interest. Your faith isn't for you necessarily. It's not so you can get what you want. It's not self-serving. But on the other end of the spectrum, faith is also not the radical denial of finding enjoyment in this life. The balance key is recognizing that our experience in this life will be mixed with what appears to be good and evil, but by faith we praise God for his approval, his accepting our portion, by accepting our portion and learning to live with it. Going back to what we began with about control in life. Faith isn't for us to feel like we are more in control. Again, it's not about control. Faith is the release of our control to God. Recently, I had a friend from college. His name is Jeremy Brummel, and I think it was 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, his sister, Brittany, I never knew her, but she had probably the hardest situation she'll ever deal with in life. She is a young mother of 2, beautiful family, and her husband suddenly passed away. And it's hard to hear, especially as he is a friend of mine, and I appreciate your prayers for their family. I know they would appreciate that right now. I was able to watch a little bit of the funeral. They posted it online. And there was a video that Brittany, the wife of the husband that died, she made it for the funeral. I don't think she could get up there to talk in front of everybody, so she made this video beforehand to show. It was one of the most powerful videos I think I've ever seen. She went through and she described her experience, specifically on the day that she lost her husband. And she talked about kind of where she was at, the perfect family, perfect little life. She had just dropped her boys off at school, first day of school, and they were all excited about it and did well going into class. And she talked about how proud she was of them, and she texted them just to tell them how proud that she was of the boys. They were doing really well, and she never heard back. And finally she gets a call saying that something has happened and that there's going to be a police escort to escort her to the hospital. And she gets to the hospital, and certainly all types of things going through her mind. And she says that she was just kind of hoping and knowing that once she gets in there, she'll see him and he'll be cracking up and everything will be okay. And she walks into the hospital and she sees close family and friends gathered around, all crying. And immediately she knows something's wrong, something's very wrong. And she goes in and they, as kindly and graciously as they can, they tell her that her husband is no longer with them. He's gone to heaven. Now, you can only imagine what you feel what you would feel if you were to go through that. And I was struck by her immediate response. She said the first thing that she could think about when she heard this news, so she just kind of sat down, she crumbled for a second, and the first thing she said, and through tears she described it in her video, she said, "The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh. Blessed be the name of the Lord." Wow. Her life came crashing down. And I realized as I was working through this and I got thinking about her testimony, I realized there was a decision that she made long before that moment to have that response. Long before that response ever happened, before that day ever happened, she made that decision that she was releasing control of her life and everything in it. Whether that was money, most importantly at this moment, her family, her husband, she released all of that to God. And she truly in her heart believed, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. What a picture of someone who long before decided to live life by letting go. Someone who recognized that it was God, not herself, that had control over every area of her life, and whether her portion be big or whether it be small. And that portion seemed very small to her on that day, I'm sure. But whether her portion be big or small, she could say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." You know, there are realities in life that we will all experience. Seemingly the righteous, the unrighteous, the good, the bad. We all go through life together. And our safety is too much in what we think we can control. Folks, the less we take control of, the more ready we are to accept whatever portion God gives us with a heart of gratitude and thanks, just like Brittany did. Is your control in the hands of God? Have you given him everything? What are you holding on to? What are you trying to control so much in life that if you were to lose it right now, you know your world would come crashing down? Can you truly say, "The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh, blessed be the name of the Lord"? Would you bow your heads?